It's Denise from Women Beyond a Certain Age. And this is our first podcast and conversation since I was gone for almost a month on a very long trip. And I'm thrilled to be back. And our first guest today is a woman who is, I don't know how Liz and I ever met, but her name is Liz Pollock. She is an author. She is a cookbook store owner. What else are you, Liz? You're a whole lot of things. I know this. You're fantastic at research and at writing. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. I am so pleased to talk with you.
Liz, the last time you were here, we were talking about your book, The Lost Restaurants of Santa Cruz. Is that correct?
Santa Cruz County. Yeah.
Santa Cruz County. And I think we were able to give one of those books away, and people loved it, by the way. Thank you so much. Liz had reached out to me beforehand about this, and this is fascinating to me. So Liz has been speaking on, reaching out to people, reaching out to publishers. She's hoping to get it published. But her lecture, one of the lectures that I listened to that Liz has done, it's called American Ingenuity and Innovation, Kitchen Appliances and Instruction Manuals. Now, Liz, the reason I'm fascinated by this, and I love it because I like the way you tell me things anyway. You know, Cindy and I wrote about 30 or 35 instruction manuals for all sorts of people, for General Electric, for infomercial. And I'll tell you something. We learned it was more than giving people a recipe. I mean, talk about instructional writing. We learned to edit better. We learned to be as simple as possible with our words so that people can understand us. So when you had told me about this, all the research you were doing and stuff, and that you had a personal collection of, instruction manuals, I just couldn't wait for you to come on and be a guest.
Well, fantastic. And I really got to hand it to you writers and cookbook authors, because when the Cuisinart, for instance, or the food processor or the microwave were first introduced to American audience, it was the cookbook authors and people such as yourself who stepped up, learned how to use it, and stylized your recipes according to your own style, and then shared that excitement with your readers and no matter what their cooking experience was. And that's how these appliances sold.
Yes.
These cookbooks help to boost the sales of the appliance. And if I can give a couple of, for instance, okay. So Abby Mandel, who I love, she wrote the Cuisinart Classroom in 1980.
Wow.
And when it was first published, it sold out in like a matter of months. 65,000 food processors. Like, how is she doing this? How is she making egg whites? How does she do that? It was like a quarter teaspoon of white vinegar. Remember that?
Yes.
Anyway, so she was an early champion of farmers markets. And she talked about make your own baby food. Don't go to the store and buy it. You can make your own baby food. When Julia Child wrote her From Julia Child's Kitchen in 1975, she doesn't name names, but she talks about this food, the super powerful food processor, like it saves so much time. She called all those dog chores, better to clean it, and inspiring cooks to try a new recipe, So I applaud you for helping.
Well, I'll tell you something, Liz. I remember, and this is from a food stylist perspective, I'll tell you this. There was a food stylist when I first started styling. She's long dead. This is 40 years ago. And I ended up on some commercial assisting someone, but she was there as a consultant. Now, she wasn't young then, okay? And she turned to me and she was very sweet and said, how did I get into food styling? And I'd gone to chef school, yes. Well, she, of course, had been a home economist because that's who really was the beginning of these things. And she said, well, that I was working for myself and I was a home economist, and Amana called me and they wanted a book to talk about how it was a frost-free freezer and where to put the food in the refrigerator because it was so large that people were buying them and then didn't know where to put the food. And I just cracked up and I thought of all the times when I was a little kid, remember on game shows, they'd say, and you're the winner of a brand new cubic something, Amana. And I remember thinking, oh my God. I mean, that was better than winning a mink coat to get this beautiful refrigerator. So that was the first time that I started thinking, oh yeah, this is all about sales, because food styling is just all about sales. That's all it ever was meant to be. Somebody had to wrangle the food to make it look better. So obviously, the same thing would apply to functioning the machine, to getting the most out of these appliances, that someone had to write down how you do that.
And, there was this whole new kind of language. I mean, I was kind of scared of a microwave. I mean, we didn't have a microwave until the late 80s.
Yes.
And it was kind of scary. I was more into the natural. I'll cook it myself. I'll chop it myself. I'll make my own, all this stuff. And so to put things in the microwave was scary to me, and especially when I had a you remember Laurel Birch put out those beautiful coffee cups with the gold beautiful painting caps and stuff. Anyway, so I don't know, I had a friend who put something like a coffee cup with a beautiful Laurel Birch, and it I thought, I don't want to drink that and I don't want to eat that. But when the microwave was first introduced, the control panel had a low, medium, and high.
Yes.
Didn't have a pizza or popcorn. It didn't have a carousel plate. So you had to stop it, rotate the dish, and then do it again. They became less heavy because they used to be really heavy, but now they're considered essential.
That's right.
What would we do without them?
I think you could not be more correct when you mentioned the microwave. Now, let me tell you, Liz, one of my best mentors in my life was the producer that brought Jacques Pepin, the TV producer, Jacques Pepin, and Martin Yan to PBS. Okay.
Wonderful.
She'd been a home economist. Her name is Linda Brandt. She's in Washington State, just a brilliant, brilliant woman. Now, she was a home economist at Sunset Magazine. And Sunset Magazine, as you remember, had those beautiful test kitchens. So a lot of people ended up at Sunset saying, help me with my product, or, that was what they were doing there. Now, Linda Brandt, so this was in the early 60s, she was talking about 60s or the 60s and the early 70s. But when we got microwaves for backstage kitchens, she'd turn around, she'd say, never stand in front of those things. Do you remember that? Everybody was terrified. And I'd say, Linda, I think that's all. She said, Denise, the girls, one of the women that tested it at Sunset ended up with ovarian cancer. Of course I said, Linda, I'm sorry to hear that. And I'm sure it wasn't the microwave, but obviously you have a link to the microwave. But I remember people being terrified of microwaves because we didn't know anything about them. And we should be terrified of things that we don't know anything about.
Right. And I think the blender is one of my favorite things because, for instance, if your kid is having a wisdom teeth out, or maybe you're getting I don't know, some kind of tooth work, dental work, that blender is a godsend. The evolution of the blender, for instance, maybe late 50s, they managed to change it from glass to a sturdy plastic. And that was great. They also put the measurement lines on the outside, so I didn't have to measure it, before I put it in. And that was nice. But you're so right. You kind of have to learn how to work these things. And in my experience, my 75 types of appliances, if I may describe my criteria.
Wow, please.
Okay, so these appliances transform foodstuffs that we bring into our kitchen, make it cold, colder, hot, hotter, keep it warm, slice, grind, beat, and keep the kitchen implements clean, like a dishwasher, and a floor polisher. That was a big deal. But also to keep the cook content and comfortable, meaning you've got an air conditioner or a nice ceiling fan, like I see that you have, a little radio, listen to the ball game, listen to Dodgers games, or one of my favorite things that we had, because I grew up in Pasadena, was a Tandy intercom. So the base was in the kitchen, and the two satellites were in the bedroom in the den. So if the school bus is here, hurry up! All you had to do was yell into, and so all of these things help the kitchen run smoothly. Yes. And help us prepare. And I feel also that a lot of appliances furthered along women's liberation. For instance, the slow cooker. Wow.
Yes.
You put it on, you go to work for 8 hours, you come back and the dinner's already cooked. That's phenomenal. It's marvelous.
You know what, Liz, when you say that, I have to tell you, and there's things. My father had always owned his own business, and it was growing in the 60s. And my parents bought this beautiful big home in they moved out of the GI Bill home that they'd bought for $16,000 and moved into, I think they paid like $53,000, which seemed like a mansion in those days. But the biggest thing is it had an intercom, and because it was a big house. So in every room, and we talked about that at length. Do you see what I'm saying? I mean, moving in,
it's
my sisters, we'd say, well, we'll have the intercom. I mean, it was like we were moving on up, as you say, because
right.
And also I have to, when we got a blender, same house. So now we're in the house. So my mother has a self-cleaning oven, and she got a floor polisher. I remember my mother, exactly what you're talking about. My mother said, well, this house practically cleans itself.
Yeah, right.
So she went from, and this was because I remember when I was tiny as a baby, her doing the wringer washer and how horrible that job looked to me. Even as a child, I remember thinking, oh my God. Right. So when all of a sudden, 10 or 11 years later, I see my mother reading a book in the afternoon or taking the dog for a walk, or, she was freer because she wasn't doing all this housework. Mm-hmm. It was amazing to me. So I agree with that. And I know it felt like that to her. Do you know what I mean? That it really felt like that to her.
Well, one of the things that I did was I wanted to really focus a lot on the patents.
Okay, please tell us about that.
I researched using the United States Trademark and Patent Office, and I wanted to find the first patent for this product. And that means that, that agency protects the designer, protects all the associations. And one of my favorite designs is the Lean Mean Fat Grilling Machine. Michael Bohm made the griddle so that the lower portion slanted downward, and then that separate little trough that went
Yes.
down and collected the grease or the butter or
Yeah.
whatever. And so in my estimation, and because they come in large family size and individual size, that's one of the most important appliances today. It means you can have a grilled cheese sandwich. You can take it in your dorm, a little teeny weeny apartment or a loft, or your RV, or whatever
Yeah.
your boat or something, and you can feed yourself. And
Yes.
that's pretty good. That's pretty
Now, and that's the design of the George Foreman grill that you described. Okay. So,
I mean, he was the spokesperson. Sure.
yes. Yes. And the reason is that I worked on that, Liz, but here's the thing. One of the most successful, George Foreman was one of the most successful people that's ever sold any appliance ever, because they've had generations of it. Okay. So he was doing 6, 7, 8 generations of that grill. Here's my favorite, and I want to talk about the blender for a minute. So we get this new house, has this big kitchen. And my mother gets some appliances, to go with her self-cleaning oven, because she has all this time. And I remember my father brought home, it had a glass top. It was Oster. It was an Osterizer blender. It was heavy. And it had not a lot of speeds, but it was like slow, medium, and high. Well, we put the frozen orange juice in that, and it became this frothy, delightful something. Do you know what I mean? With adding some water. And I remember thinking, I've never tasted anything this delicious in my life. And we had, that blender, I can remember it. And then my father made gin fizzes on the weekend, but I remember that blender became, again, it was like magical.
Right.
And my mother made pancake batter in it, and my mother started using it for all sorts of things.
Right. And you become less, fearful of trying a new recipe. For instance, I wanted to talk about appliances that let people continue to prepare their cultural dishes, like the electric wok.
Yes.
For instance, back in the 40s, there were those deep fryer things. It's like 3 cups of grease.
Yes.
What are you going to do with that? You can strain it and all that, but I'm not putting that huge fryer on my nice dining room table. Anyway, but the electric wok is kind of like introduces you to maybe new vegetables that you haven't cooked with before, or certainly a healthier approach to dinners.
Absolutely.
And the electric rice cooker, oh my gosh, it's so much easier. And there's an electric pasta machine, an electric tortilla press.
Yes.
Yeah. Why not make it easy on yourself? If you have a large family, or if you want to get things done, or if you're a cookbook author, get it done. And
this is so funny you should say that, and because I pulled it out recently. During the pandemic, I made some sourdough bread, Liz. I wouldn't give myself an A+. Jim Dodge wasn't feeling threatened anywhere in the world when I posted my pictures, but they tasted pretty good. But I have to tell you, one of the things that I pulled out after that, when I did it for a while, I bought a bread machine at Costco for like $48. I remember it very well. It's one of the name brands. It was on sale. But because my husband said, oh, I would really like that. Now, of course, Liz, my husband doesn't even know where the kitchen is unless something's cooking and he smells it and he follows his nose to the kitchen. But I bought that bread machine. And you know what? Several stores, King Arthur has one now too, but a lot, Williams Sonoma, they sell the bread mix in the box for $8-10. Do you know how good that loaf? I mean, you can just make your own, but I'm saying sometimes when I buy one of those mixes and put it in the bread machine, I feel like Nancy Silverton. That's right.
Right.
And
Right.
it's so easy and it's foolproof is what really I was getting
Exactly.
at, because I found with my sourdough, as I was getting better at it, some loaves were definitely better than others. Do you know what I mean? And
Sure.
I was using the same recipe and my starter was the same, but I certainly don't have the knowledge at my fingertips yet that I need to make really beautiful sourdough bread. But I'll tell you, the bread machine, I plug that thing in, and if I bought a mix online and I put them there, my husband comes downstairs and says, that smells so delicious. It's such a treat.
It is a treat.
And it took me 3 minutes. I didn't have to suffer at all.
You know, all of these big, heavy, because a bread machine is kind of large.
Yes.
So in the early 70s, maybe late 60s, some of them, like Sunbeam especially,
yes,
came out with and they dovetailed with the name escapes me, but it's a like simplicity pattern. You could make your own appliance covers. You could make them in strawberries or flowers or ducks or something like that, so that these appliances, big heavy things, it doesn't look so industrial on your counter, and you don't have to put it on down below. They're actually kind of pretty. You have one with like maybe a Christmas motif or something, but I think that learning how to make these new things, like the new, coffee machine and everything. It's such a sense of accomplishment.
yes.
And I, it's really a matter of personal organization, where to keep your appliance manual. And luckily for me, I collect them, and my earliest one is from like about 1922.
Wow.
It's for an oil stove. Can you imagine?
No.
With wicks, and talk about dangerous.
Yeah.
Then, I also have one of this is maybe early 30s to maybe late 40s, is the gas refrigerator. And so that would be, regular size, but you'd, instead of electricity, you had a tank, like a tank, a bottle that a guy would come to your house and transfer it out and exchange it. But it was full of sulfur dioxide. And then later on in the after World War II, and so forth, it was put in Freon, which was really, that was banned 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And I feel like, my topic of collection, it's controversial. I mean, the LA Times just ran an article about maybe the notion of changing gas stoves in a restaurant.
I know.
I don't think so. I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's really geared for new homes, new development, and all that.
That's what you bring up is a very interesting point, Liz. And I was reading something in the Times, and I've read it in a couple other places. When I worked on the cruise ships, they of course, could not have an open flame. So there was no gas stoves. Now, in the kitchens of those old cruise ships, they still had gas stoves. But I was in the big theater with 200 people sitting, and they didn't want a whisper of a chance of an accident. So they gave me, is it the conduction? Is that the word for it? Induction. Now, it comes with special pans. And if you don't have the right pans, the stove won't work. So there's a safety factor. But of course, when I would get on and all of a sudden had to, and every single ship was different. Of course, they couldn't have all been the same. But I would try to cook on that induction burner, and sometimes it was successful and sometimes it was a mess. And I'm talking about recipes that I've cooked for 50 years, Liz, but I'm so used to gas. And I know how to adjust gas, and I know how to move it off the burner, and I know just how to turn it off. Do you know what I mean? And
Sure.
once you've cooked with gas, I don't want to cook with anything else.
Right. And I had to kind of draw the line of where I would stop in my examples. It was about 2005, something like that. And the reason I did is because I have a realtor friend who says when she sells a house, she wants her seller to completely get new appliances. I mean, why not? It's going to sell better.
Yeah.
So the making it clean and so forth. So she sees a trend. Remember where the trash compactor was?
Yes.
Like to the left of the sink or something.
Yes.
Now it's a wine cooler.
Me. That's exactly what we did. My house is 20 years old. And I got to it. The kitchen has got a gas stove, a self-cleaning oven. It works really, really well. It's but it's from the 90s, and you can tell by the cabinets and the splash, the backsplash that I've got. But next to the sink, there was this trash compactor, whatever. I recycle everything I can, Liz. And I said to my husband, I don't want this thing. And it also was broken. We needed to buy a new one. And it was the realtor, exactly what you're saying, said, they make little wine cabinets that'll fit right in there. And that's what we did.
They're adorable.
They're adorable. And I think it takes 15, 16 bottles of wine. I mean, it's not that small, but that's what we did because I didn't want a trash compactor.
Sure. And I think we kind of move into the future, and
yeah.
And I like it. I think that when I look back at World War II and what we had, or well, not me exactly, but where my parents had to, scrimp and save and make do and do without.
Yes.
One of the big savior things was because you couldn't have an appliance guy come to your house because he was overseas fighting the war, right? So you had to fix the gasket yourself on your fridge.
Yes.
You dried your fruit in the oven. Isn't that fantastic? Or outside, but in the oven. And we take things for granted. And one of my favorite things is the food dehydrator that has about 5 little trays.
Yes.
I just love that thing. And it's good for saving. And I mean, we're all trying to save a nickel here and there, but I find that I wanted to, if I may, talk about this exhibit that I have.
Please.
So the Book Club of California is in San Francisco, and they've been around since 1912. Wow. And it's like a museum. It's on Sutter Street, right around the corner from Grant. And they have beautiful fine press and the American West and printing and here's my exhibit of my ordinary little bitsy booklets and brochures, but they're so unusual and they reflect the American lifestyle and how the kitchen has been a teaching room. It's a room to learn how to use a standing mixer and the rotisserie and so forth, and so and then all of the color combinations and the layout and the typeface, and I feel that today's printers and bibliophiles can learn a lot by looking at these old booklets and maybe be inspired, by this. Vintage is in, nostalgia is in.
Absolutely. But also, Liz, it's the history. I mean, one of the things, if I thought, for me, and this is just because when I was working, a lot of our work, a lot of Cindy's and my work was development of product. So we would get people that did infomercials, or like George Foreman's crew when I worked for them, or I'm trying to think of other spokesmen we worked for. Florence Henderson was selling a Tefal pressure cooker. She was the most wonderful person in the world. She was the front woman for that. And what was cute about that, just as a side note, is after she saw me for five days, we're cooking with her, she said to me, Denise, I can't boil water. I said, I know that, Florence. She said, but I could cook with this, couldn't I? I said, yes, you could. Just make sure you get the lid on. Oh. And she was riot because she really didn't cook much. Why would Florence Henderson cook? She'd been singing, dancing, and entertaining since she was about 17 years old. So she didn't need to cook. But
it's adorable.
Adorable. All of the things about appliances, which when I was selling them, working on them, getting paid to work on them, I gave them all away to people. Okay. We would finish, and Cindy, I'd say, do you want this? No. Sometimes they'd send us 4 or 5 of the Ninja blenders and stuff. I'd send it to my niece. I'd send, we'd keep one for the test kitchen, but I didn't even use most of that stuff. Okay. Fast forward. Well, I've retired, and guess what, Liz? It's like starting the bread. I pulled out my slow cooker. I pulled out my wand that I never used, because now I have time to make a big pot of soup, and it's so much easier to use the brawn wand that I have. So I bought an air fryer, Liz, because, and we had tested several. We gave them away. One of the kids that worked with us took it. I thought, I'm never going to use this. Well, guess what? Now that I cook dinner every single night, I found that I bought a small air fryer. And do you know what? Sometimes, and I know it sounds stupid, and I've cooked forever, so I know what I'm saying. Sometimes I brown a beautiful steak. We're going to split it in my cast iron skillet. And then I stick it for the last 2 minutes in the air fryer, because it crisps up the gristle and the fat, and it's utterly delicious. And sometimes I cook chicken breasts and I stick them in the air fryer, and my husband says to me, this is the best chicken you've ever made. So there is something to be said for those air fryers, which I had poo-pooed and poo-pooed and poo-pooed until I had time to really cook with them.
And it's a generational thing too. I mean, young people are totally into it. College kids, teenagers love their air fryer, the chicken wings and all that stuff. They love it.
The one I bought off Amazon just has one door. I mean, I looked at all sorts, and it was $100, was on Amazon, and I bought it, Liz, because I bought it because I'd been reading about them, and I knew that Cindy and I had tested a few. But I thought, I might use that when I don't want to turn the whole oven on for one little steak or whatever. Well, it turns out I use it almost every single day.
Whoa. I wanted to bring up to you in the early 70s when HBG helped to move this along for the credit card able to use. And if I can backtrack just a bit and talk about the Montgomery Ward catalog, the Sears catalogs. I love all those catalogs. Inside the old catalogs, and I collect those, by the way. Oh my God.
Oh, how fun though.
So much fun. But there's a apply for a Montgomery Ward catalog or card. But it says in 1974, you do not have to be a man. You don't have to declare yourself a woman or a man. And that's because this particular law that, of course, I forget what the number is, but it was significant because then people could order online and furnish their tiny apartment in New York City or St. Louis or something. And these credit cards allowed you, before Amazon, yes, they allowed you to bring things into your home, open up the box, set it up, learn how to use it. And that's fantastic. Feed yourself and maybe entertain, have a party, or have your family over, your friends, and it meant that more people wouldn't be beholden to their husband having the credit card. And I think it's wonderful. Besides the catalogs and mail order catalogs, I think that and in my book I interview people who they saved those green stamps.
Yes.
They made it a game for the kids to fill out the little books for the blue chip stamps. All that was so much fun. And I grew up, my mom put stuff on layaway all the time.
I was going to say, I'm so old, Liz. I remember layaway. And it just shows our society is just, everything is so sped up. But I'm sure, now this is what I don't know. I remember asking my mother about layaway, okay, when I was a little girl, because one of my friend's mother said, well, we may get that, we'll put it on layaway. And I didn't know what she was talking about. So I asked my mother, and my mother immediately said, well, we'll just pay for it. We don't have to put anything on layaway. So my mother immediately, kind of scoffed at layaway. But now layaway, the store, you paid 3 or 4 months? Did you pay some interest on layaway in those days? Or did you just make the payments 3 or 4 times, I wonder?
Well, I remember having it, really liking something and telling my mom.
Yes.
Then she'd maybe, she'd have Sears hold it on a shelf with our name on it. And then she'd go in maybe twice a month, every other week or something, and put a little bit, like $10 here or whatever like that. And then at Christmas, it was wrapped under the tree.
There wasn't any interest.
I don't think so, no.
Well, see, now we should go back to that, because one of the problems that we have in America is everybody buys everything, and then we're paying 21% interest on a credit card.
I know. Terrible.
Different world. Different generation. Now, Liz, if people want to know more about the work you've been doing, how can they reach you about your research? I know we're praying. I want everyone who's listening to pray. We want a publisher to buy Liz's book, but I know that with your display and with your collections that you certainly if people are interested, how do they contact you?
My telephone number is 831-251-9218, and that's in Santa Cruz. My bookstore is
beautiful books
open in from 10 to 6 Monday through Saturday.
Wow.
I'm here all the time.
Yeah.
And I have books on all kinds of gastronomy and wine and a little bit of gardening, but mostly, I have a lot of ephemera, and I collect a lot of vintage restaurant menu and cocktail lists. I'm into that because I'm a certified mixologist. But I wanted to say I'm also giving a talk.
Oh, good.
May 13th at the Culinary Historians of Southern California, and it'll be at the Mark Taper not the Forum. No, the Mark Taper Auditorium of the LA Public downtown on 5th. And
I'm a member also, and also now. So it's a wonderful group. If people want to know about that, it's an absolutely wonderful group. Now, are they going to Zoom it too? Liz, do you know, or are they just doing them all live now? Because during COVID, they were Zooming them, and it was wonderful to be able to not drive down to the theater. You know what I mean? So it's beautiful.
I think it can be seen. I'll get back to you on that, but it can be seen after the fact because they make a link into the YouTube or whatever it's called.
Yeah,
but I'll be talking about the American manufacturing companies, and if I can digress for 1 second, and they were Rosie the Riveters, the American appliance manufacturing companies. In World War II, they halted what they were doing and instead made ships and airplanes for the war effort. And then when, our guys came back and war was over, then they went back to, full steam ahead of building dryers and dishwashers and so forth. But in the meantime, Long Beach, that was a big shipyard, and
Yes.
and a lot of places up in Newark and Oakland and so forth. But we so I'll be focusing a lot on the American appliance manufacturers, and in my book I list 105, and some of them, they employed hundreds and thousands of American, men and women, and they were good union jobs.
Yes.
Some of them were gobbled up by bigger companies, like Admiral was then bought up by Whirlpool, and then that was bought up by Maytag, and so on and so on. Some of them have gone out of business. That's the way it goes.
You know what, Liz? It's so interesting to me. Thank you so much. It's so interesting to me. I am a member of the culinary historians in Southern California, and if people want to find out how to be a member, that's easy. It's very reasonable. It's a beautiful newsletter, and I think I had read that. I knew you were going to be giving a talk there, but what you're talking about is really just the history of it is fascinating, Liz, and I thank you so much. So I hope that people will reach out to Liz, and she has a gorgeous bookstore. So if you need to find a rare book, she's the woman to talk to. Liz, thank you so much for today. And
thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm sending prayers and light and crossed fingers to the publishers that you've sent it to, that one of them gets smart enough to publish the book.
Hear, hear.
But honey, it is what it is in this day and age. That's all I say to people. It's a different world.
Whenever you're in Santa Cruz, I will roll out the red carpet for you.
Oh, I can hardly wait. That sounds marvelous. Honey, thank you so much. I want to thank Miss Cindy. I want to thank all the people that listen and that reach out to us. And lots of times people have questions, but they don't want to put it on the Facebook page. They do it to me privately, and I'm happy to answer your questions. So you're welcome, but anyone, we're at womenbeyond@icloud.com. Of course, when Cindy broadcasts this, we'll put up Liz's information so people can reach her. So Liz, thank you. Cindy, thank you as always. And it's lovely to be back. I took a vacation and it was wonderful. And I know. So thank you, Liz, for today. And
we enjoyed your vacation too.
You know what? It was really, I hadn't gone anywhere because of COVID, Liz, obviously, like most of us. And I got to the best part of it. The trip was fabulous, but I had never been to Vienna, and I am so in love with Vienna now. I can't even stand it. But it was lovely to, I was proud of myself because I carried my own luggage. I walked sometimes 16 and 18,000 steps a day. I know I made money exchanges. I did everything all by myself, and I'm proud of myself that I did it. And I came back in better shape than when I left.
Yay! Good for you. It's inspiring.
It made me feel good because sometimes, as you know, when you work alone, or now that I'm retired and I'm here alone, you get into this feeling that you're not accomplishing anything, even though it's just, I know from my personality, but so I feel very accomplished again.
Bravo.
Yeah.
That's good. I'm so glad.
Thanks, Cindy. Take care. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.